Technology, diversity, wine, the redwoods, and everything in between. Welcome to the Northern California Bay Area, and one show takes you inside the real estate that makes it all happen. This is By the Bay.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to By the Bay. I'm your host, Dan Ancheta. Let me find my microphone. Here it is. Thanks for being here on By the Bay. Really excited that you are here and grateful that you are liking and subscribing on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you might find this. And if you would drop a comment, that we were just talking before the show about how it's really nice when people drop a comment and let us know that you're here, because sometimes it's just like we're kind of talking into the void. We're not really sure who's listening. But I run into people at the grocery store like, I saw your podcast, which is great. But if you're seeing this, please do hit the like button. That'd be really great. Today, I have a returning guest, Bianca Broos from the Bianca Broos Company, and Anthony Galiano from Spring EQ. I had to think about it there for a second. And we'll talk, before we get into talking about the topic, which I'm not sure what it is, but we'll find it. Tell us who you are and what you do, and give us the brief background. And obviously the focus of the show is Bay Area real estate, mortgage, business development, kind of brand identity, kind of all that stuff. So tell us about that.
So I live in the Bay Area. Been here for 18 years. I know this because my 19-year-old daughter is just getting ready to start her second year in college at the JC. So I'm a business and brand strategist. I founded my company just about 3 days after I moved here, with the focus of being actively engaged as an advisor in Sonoma County. And since then, I've been very fortunate that my business has grown and blossomed, and growth and blossoming happens in an upwards, downward manner. And so we've definitely been fortunate to have an impact here in Sonoma County and the Bay Area.
Nice.
And then also work nationally with other lenders and larger companies, not just in the lending space, but that's what I do.
It's really interesting because we're all approaching the same industry from three very different perspectives. Yeah. Yep. Right. So kind of curious to see where the conversation goes. But Anthony, tell us kind of who you are and what you do.
Anthony Galiano. I'm with Spring EQ, which is one of the top home equity solution providers in the country. I've been with the company for a little while now, but I've been in the lending space 26 years now.
Nice.
Always shocks me when I say that number, and it keeps going up. I kept saying once it hit 20 years I was going to stop there.
It'd be more than 20 years would be the standard.
20 plus.
Yeah, 20 plus years. Yeah.
26 years at this point, and I've kind of done just about everything there is to do in the lending space, from correspondent lending to being a loan officer, both in a call center and a traditional loan officer. I've worked in operations.
Wow. So you've seen the industry from not only different perspectives, but different time periods.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So I always tell people I don't know mortgage lending before TRID. Right. I've been in the business for 8, based off when my daughter was born. So let's see, she's 7. So the year before, so 8 years, just over 8 years. And TRID had already happened. So I don't know the world of good faith estimates. Right. Except for on reverse mortgages, which is a test question.
Yes.
You're looking to get your license. So interesting different perspectives. So you're coming from the branding partnership kind of level. I'm running a retail operation with multiple locations on the mortgage banking side. So it's kind of interesting. Where are we right now in the landscape of the mortgage business? Right? Because we're here we are. It's August 2024, and I always have to say that because sometimes people listen to the show and it's 6 months later.
Yes.
Right? The world is different.
And it's so different.
Right?
Yeah.
So where is the mortgage industry at right now, from your perspective?
Mortgage industry today is, we kind of go through this every few years, right? It's such a roller coaster in this industry. Things are really good, and then all of a sudden business starts to slow down, interest rates go up, whatever the case is. I'm not surprised we are where we are right now. Home values continue to go up.
Right.
Interest rates are starting to kind of level out, and we'll see some dips in rates, and then they go back up again. I think that has impacted what inventory is available right now. You have a lot of consumers that would typically have either downsized or moved somewhere else. that it just doesn't make sense to do so.
And that's a really interesting space for your business currently, right? Because we were talking when you got here, I was pricing a scenario where the customer has like a 3% interest rate on their first mortgage, and it's not a small loan. It's like a $600,000 loan, but the house is worth a couple $1,000,000 and the kitchen's dated and they need to do a couple things. And so they're looking at a home equity product, either a fixed rate second or variable traditional equity line, because they don't want to give up that 3% rate, right? So that's a really interesting space that we're seeing more interest in, and Fannie and I think Freddie is piloting a program to do a securitized fixed rate second equity product. So kind of for listeners who maybe aren't super familiar, can you explain kind of what that looks like for a consumer? Like, why do an equity line as opposed to a cash out refinance?
Absolutely.
And give us the background on that.
The biggest benefit to a consumer today is with a cash out refinance, you're losing whatever the rate is that you have today. And there are people that have rates that were sub 3% and even up to 3.5%, 4%. No one wants to lose that rate.
Sure.
And again, it kind of goes back to why people haven't sold their homes, right? I don't want to get into something else that with property values going where they are and interest rates being so much higher, it doesn't make sense. Utilizing a home equity line of credit or a fixed rate home equity loan gives you the ability to access the asset that you have, use the equity in that home for things like we were talking about earlier, whether it's a new kitchen, whether it's debt consolidation. There's a lot of reasons that people want to tap into the equity that they have. When you start looking at, if I did a cash out refinance, what would my rate be? When you then look at it and say, home equity credit, for example, I'm going to borrow the amount that I need, be able to borrow against that as I need it. My payment's going to fluctuate based on what I'm borrowing, but I'm never losing the rate that first mortgage.
Right.
And then I can use it to start paying down that home equity line or home equity loan as I want.
Right.
It's a great way. And most consumers don't realize how much equity they do have available.
Right.
Or how to utilize that equity to the best of what's going to benefit them the most.
Totally. We have this conversation often with clients, and they're, considering, they need to access some equity for whatever reason. And I think what you said earlier is really important, that a lot of consumers now are reconsidering selling what they currently own and buying the next home for them, even though that might make sense lifestyle wise. In California with Prop 13, we've got essentially fixed property taxes. So like if you we bought our house for $900,000, it's worth a lot more than that now. And for us to make that incremental move up, we'd have to spend a lot of money and get reassessed at a $2 million purchase price on it for a home. And it just doesn't pencil, doesn't make sense. So we made the decision to remodel our house and make it work for us so we can keep the tax basis and keep our interest rate, because we're a sub 3 rate.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made total sense to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We had saved and we paid cash for the remodel, but I totally see the need and the demand to take equity out to do that project and to keep your economics looking the same and not give up that interest rate and be able to still accomplish kind of those lifestyle things, right?
Where the rest of the economy is, people are utilizing that because consumer debt has skyrocketed.
Right.
When you look at just the cost of anything at this point, how much higher it's got, people have gotten into a lot of trouble with credit card debts, things like that, personal loans that are out there. Being able to use that equity, tie it into the home that you own that has that equity available, pay down some of those other debts that you roll it into a much better payment, especially when you look at where interest rates are on credit cards compared to
27%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the trillions of dollars of accumulated credit card debt. And we look at people's credit all the time, and most households right now are carrying at least $10,000 of credit card debt, even if they have cash, right? So it's kind of always surprising to me, maybe not surprising, but interesting to me that you might have someone who has $250,000 to put down on a house, but they're also carrying $15,000 of credit card debt. And you ask them why, they're like, I just need this cash. Just feel really like I just
feel a
want
lot better with the cash.
I feel a lot better having the cash. Like, okay, well, whatever you want. quick tangent, but just something that want your opinions on. We've seen all these lawsuits with the National Association of Realtors and commission lawsuits, and there's lending lawsuits, all these lawsuits. When is the auto lender and credit card lawsuit coming? Because I see some people, some credit, some borrowers that have 550 credit scores, but they just got like a $40,000 car loan.
Yeah.
Isn't that predatory? I mean, this is kind of putting you on the spot here, but there's a line that has to be drawn somewhere, right? We're going after realtors for these commissions. At what point do we look at the car industry and go, now we need like the TRID equivalent for the auto industry?
I completely agree. And when you talk about the auto lending, you talk about credit cards.
Right.
People went from having a credit card interest rate in, let's just call it the teens, somewhere in that range. I've seen people post on LinkedIn, hey, if you haven't looked at your credit card statement recently, and they called out specific credit card companies or financial institutions, take a look at it. I just got mine in the mail and it's 34.2% right now.
I think the thing that gets me is I'm a big believer in the housing industry. We sell mortgage products for a living, right? Big believer in using real estate to build wealth over time. Yet we are constantly being bombarded with compliance requests. And I'm kind of like, what does credit card and a car loan, how does that build wealth for a household? Yet they just largely go unchecked. Is it just because the auto industry is so ingrained in the federal government? Like, what is the lobby? Because the housing industry is just as big and just as much of an economic driver.
I would argue that it's an even bigger economic driver than any other part of the financial spectrum. I mean, you're right. Owning a home creates generational wealth.
Yes. And there's data behind that.
Yes.
That's irrefutable.
Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why I joined Spring EQ and who they are as an organization, what their platform is, what they're offering. We were talking about it earlier. We just rolled out it's a fixed rate home equity line of credit. So it gives the consumer the best of both worlds, where it's a fixed interest rate. It's not going to adjust like a traditional home, right? But you can still draw against it as you need it, right? So
that's relatively unique. That's been one of the hangups where it's like, hey, if you want the fixed rate, you got to take the lump sum, right? Or you take the variable rate and
take it as you need it.
Take it as you need it. So this is the best of both.
This is the best of both worlds. But so many consumers are used to understanding, hey, you're building that equity, don't touch it. And in most cases, don't touch it. But when you're in a situation where what you're paying every month on a minimum payment on your credit cards,
totally,
and, you have student loans that you may have taken out for your kids or whatever it is, when you start really looking at tying that into some of the equity that's available in your home, the financial benefits to you give you the ability to then, you're going to wind up putting money in your pocket and being able to, now increase what you're putting into your retirement. And the payments that people are making on consumer debt is strangling.
Right.
It really is.
And I think this is the case for utilizing a local qualified consultant who's approaching you as a unique case that needs to be fully analyzed and looked at and solutions provided, instead of the one size fits all, you need a loan, here's your cash out refi. Because a cash out refi might make sense, but also the second might. Sorry, Bianca, go ahead.
No. Well, because it's like, when you think about it, when a person goes and gets a loan, most of the time they don't do that as frequently as they purchase a car or furniture or charge something on a credit card. So when you are a consumer engaging a wealth mechanism, which is home ownership, what do you know about wealth building? And what does your advisor tell you about that? The auto industry, right? Like the whole, I just recently bought a car. It's used, but it's the first time that I've had a car payment in as long as I've lived in California. And it gave me a big pause, because I'm asking myself, or asked myself at the time, what does this actually do for my net worth? What does this do for how does this money work for me?
Right.
And, from a branding point of view, it's cute, because people will tell me, well, it's your brand. It's how you show up. And it's true, right? You get to a place in business and in life where you are considering how you spend your money, and it's a reflection of who you are. But that is how the consumer mindset works. And that is how credit cards get you. And that is how auto loans get you, because they promise you a return that has to do with your image. True wealth building, home ownership, real estate, a loan that's tied to a appreciating asset such as real estate, that is not so much about your image. It's about your legacy.
Right.
It's about who you want to be, not just today, but if you have family, if you have children, you have a moral, ethical, and fiduciary responsibility to support them in building their lives.
Totally.
So that is far beyond, what the consumers encouraged and empowered with. And I think as advisors in your seat here locally, you actually you're empowering the consumer to think of themselves as a person who is engaging their wealth building tools through a home loan.
You hit on something there, and I think it's really important. I wanted to kind of capture it, is that you have a responsibility as someone who has access to information, right? If you're a consumer right now, there's data out there that says home ownership is how you create generational wealth, right? That is a fact. That information is widely available. How to get qualified for a loan, how to improve your credit score, how to save money, how to budget. All this information is widely available on the internet. It is available with a local mortgage consultant who cares about you and your future. If you are not accessing that information, you are being irresponsible, right, for your future generations, right?
But at the same time, though, Dan, I think as the professional, right? So think of other industries.
Yep.
The medical industry does a really great job reminding you that you need to go get your checkup, your yearly checkup. Your dentist does a really good job reminding you you need to go to get your teeth
You
cleaned.
get scheduled 6 months in
You're
advance.
just like, this is what you do.
Yes.
Mortgage advisors and those who call themselves as advisors are far and few in between, because most of the time they position themselves as, you need a loan, come talk to me. But you have the opportunity to be an advisor, which means you talk to the audience, and everyone who's listening to your podcast should call you. You're welcome. Your phone's going to ring off the hook.
Well, according to the data, about 4 people are going to call. I can handle the 4 calls.
Awesome.
Yes.
But they should call you not because they need a loan, but because they need that information.
100%.
And they can look at it. They can ask Google, but I don't want to ask Google about whether or not I need a mammogram. I need to ask my doctor that.
100%.
I need to ask my advisor.
And I think it's, you said, is the positioning. And your point is well taken. And I think that what I was getting to with it's your responsibility thing. The flip side of that is that the advisor's job is to advise.
Yes.
Right.
And if you're approaching this business as, even from the real estate perspective, as I'm here to sell you a house,
Right.
you're missing it.
Yeah.
Right. You're not here to sell them a house. You're creating solutions for them.
Yeah.
You're creating a sense of place. You're creating belonging. You're creating home. You're
Yeah.
creating wealth. You're doing all of these things. And if you're just here to make loans, like you're doing 5% of the job.
Yeah. And that's what NAR was getting at, right? Like the lawsuit that hit realtors and buyers agents, and that idea of like falling apart at the change, and oh my gosh, what are we going to do, and who's going to pay us, and the same people who paid you before,
right.
The consumer, right? But you have a responsibility to let them know what it is you're charging, what you're charging for, what actually is involved in this, and now you have actually an incredible opportunity to advise.
100%. I took that message to my team a couple weeks ago, and it was like, hey, be blunt. Explain to people exactly how you get paid. It should not be a mystery about how you get paid. And most consumers, the ones you want to work with, want you to make money for providing the service that you're bringing.
Yeah.
We don't go to restaurants and eat and expect not to pay.
No,
You go there knowing
it's a terrible ROI from a money point of view.
Oh, 100%.
Right? Like going to a restaurant is just a huge waste of money if you want to think about it.
it is. We
But
go
you're
out
not going for that.
We go on a date, and it's $250 to $300 for a meal. That's our weekly grocery bill in one meal.
Yeah.
And we have a family of 5 that eat a ton, by the way.
Yeah.
The snack drawer is always empty. I don't
Snacks,
know
it's
how,
always the
but the snack drawer is always empty. It's not a good ROI. It's about the experience. It's about a statement of, we know this is a waste of money, but it's about us spending time together.
Time
Right.
value money, right?
Yeah. Well, you teaching consumers and you're reminding yourself, and I think this is where the industry has an opportunity to take stock, right? An ROI is not just a return on your financial investment. An ROI is measured in time, value. So when you buy a home at a higher interest rate, because interest rates are up, your job as an advisor, whether you're a realtor or a mortgage lender or you are the consumer, understand that interest rate is the least interesting thing if you are at the point in time right now to where you need to consider investing into your future. Here, the interest rates, no one's changing those.
Right.
So whether they come up or down, the price of the home that you're able to afford, there are some critical conversations around first-time home buyership, accessibility, but they start way sooner than we would like them to start. They don't start at what is the value of the home and what's the interest rate. They start at, education.
Mm-hmm.
They start at financial fitness. They start at the ability to understand DTI. So I think we need to inform each other about what is that's possible, even though the circumstances are not.
I think the financial fitness thing is really interesting, and there's obviously lots of tools and resources there to help manage that. But I do think it comes down to a bit of a cultural thing that we need to, I feel like we need to address, where, you see all these statement pieces about, oh yeah, we bought this new car. I got a Mercedes. I have this. And what does that say about me? I'm driving a new whatever, or I'm wearing a certain brand or doing these other things. And that seems to be our cultural signal of success. But when you look behind, I have had the privilege of looking behind the scenes at a lot of people's balance sheets in my prior career as a commercial banker and now as a mortgage banker. And that's not indicative of how much wealth is actually there.
No.
Like what people drive doesn't actually tell you what they're worth, right? And a lot of times it's kind of a false signal in a way. So I really hope that over time and I think this is happening generationally because there's a lot of conversations about house hacking and how do you get into home ownership and passive income and all these things in the younger generation. I can say that now. I turned 40, so I can say younger generation if I'm allowed to. I really hope that culturally we shift from, hey, my car signal who I am to, well, one, who I am and what I believe in is the most important thing. And two, how I'm prioritizing things like wealth building and security and creating opportunity for my next generation, all these other things. I hope that becomes the gauge of success at some point in the future. I feel like we might be heading there. I'm not sure what you guys think about that.
No, I do. I think it's a thing each generation learns. What are we teaching our kids about what generational wealth is, why it's important to own a home, what they should be focusing on? Don't worry about the next most popular water bottle that's out because I have more Stanley cup that
Stanleys are
stacked
out
on top of the hydro flasks.
The Owalas are in.
Yes.
Because the mouthfeel on that. Have you had one of those?
No.
Because I don't like the straw. Let's talk about this. Quick pivot. So the straw is out. It's about like the molded plastic. It's like the
Isn't
McDonald's
there like
straw.
almost two holes?
There is. You know what I'm talking about. Because like the McDonald's straw has it's a larger diameter. So like the soda feels better in your mouth. Not that I drink a lot of soda, but you get the point.
Yeah.
I mean, Stanleys are out.
They are.
Yeah.
Anyway. Absolutely.
It's really interesting. So we both have kids that are similar in age.
Yeah.
And they're young adults, which whatever. They're young adults. And they are measuring for the concert ticket and the water bottle and the car and where they live, right? But it's interesting because I learned I had to define for me personally, my definition of success came from the fact that I was an immigrant and my family was adamant about the fact that I would get an education and get a good job. They really didn't care what the job was as long as it was attached to good education. And that's how they communicated that eventually I'll be able to buy a house. So my kids didn't get that same pressure. They got an entirely different experience. Totally. So I think it's important to and I'm with you. I get to say the younger generation, but I think it's important to recognize the next generation learns what we've taught them, what we've modeled, and what we say is okay. So what do we click on? What do we say yes to?
Right.
How do we communicate? What are our value propositions? How do we vote? How do we speak about our neighbor? Do we even know who that is?
Right.
That all influences how you then think of the role you play in engaging wealth. Because home ownership is not just what you own. It's literally how you engage in society. It has less to do with the 123 Cherry Street and the zip code, and it has everything to do about your financial viability. Just like your blood pressure communicates a viability,
right? So
does this. It's an invitation to participate, and we don't tell our kids that.
Right. On that note, we bought our first primary residence, converted it to be a rental property, and we go and like do stuff there, right? We have to go pull weeds and stuff. And teaching the kids at a very low level, because they're 2, 4, and 7. Like the people who live here, like pay us to live here, and we actually make money every month when they live here. And they're like, that's really interesting. And they're starting to get that concept.
Yeah.
But I was really grateful for the opportunity to communicate that to them, because at a very, very young age, that's normal.
Yes.
It wasn't normal for me
right.
to be a landlord.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I hope my kids see that and go, wow, my parents owned rental property and they generated wealth through that. And someone else paid the mortgage on that house. And that's kind of why they're able to live the way that they live and retire and whatever else, of course, in the future.
But Dan, what I love about what you said is that you are pulling weeds there.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So there's this flip side of like, we own rental property and we're awesome and we are winning and we're doing it right. And the rest of you, well, good luck. But when you're showing there's a work ethic that's connected with that, it's a stickiness, a grittiness. And I love that you model that to them because they'll just absorb it.
I hope it's normal for them.
Yeah.
I hope that they see that
work.
Normalizing that we work really hard.
Yeah.
I did have a question you said earlier, and it spurred a thought is, what was the thing that happened in each of your lives? Because I have one that was like, oh, this is success. Like, is there a thing? Maybe I'll share mine, or you can think about it. The thing that we do in our family that I'm like, oh, we are successful, is that we have dinner together every night. And I was thinking about like, how do people feel success? Is it the BMW? Is it paying off the house? Like, what are the things in your life that you're like, oh, because we do this, we've done it? Is there a thing for you?
I don't know that there's a specific thing that said, okay, this is success. I do remember the days where I would I have pictures on my phone when my kids were younger, and all of their friends had cell phones, and it was my oldest daughter's, I think, 16th birthday. Took a bunch of her friends out to dinner, and they all knew. Didn't even have to ask. They knew. We went to a hibachi place.
Oh, I love a good.
Every one of those girls came over and handed me their cell phones. A couple of them had, Apple Watches, and they put it all down in front of me because they know my rule is when we're having dinner together, whether it's just us, me, the kids, a few of us, or all of their friends, there's no cell phones at the table.
Love that.
That was the success that I felt like they're learning, they're listening, they're hearing. And I have a picture of I think it was 2 or 3 stacks of cell phones in front of me. You could see the kids behind me.
But just to note, you took out your cell phone at the table, just to be clear.
Just to be clear. Picture, yes.
And by the way, 16th birthday with like the onion volcano. Yeah. They can't imagine anything better than that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's
but
amazing.
It's also seeing things like, teaching my kids and getting them to, it's something Bianca and I, we talk about often. My oldest is 19. Her first car was a Jeep Wrangler, and it's used, but this thing is a beast. And my entire thought around it was, I want her in a tank. If God forbid something happens, she gets into an accident, I want to make sure that she's. Unfortunately, there were a couple of accidents early on and it did make me feel a lot better, right?
Gotta get that good roll cage.
She's now understanding that because she's going into her second year of college as well. She goes to a state school. It's about an hour away from home. So she'll still drive back and forth every once in a while, but she's starting to realize that, hey, Dad, my Jeep only gets about 10 miles a gallon.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a lot of money to fill this up. And early on when I had that conversation, like, I think maybe we should trade the Jeep in and get you something more, a little more economical. No. And now it's the conversation of, what do we have to do to trade this in?
Nice.
I think because we're setting her up now, having the conversations around putting together a budget. What are your expenses? What do you have?
That's not taught though, right?
Yeah.
That's a family conversation that's needing to be had. And unfortunately, I don't think that a lot of parents are really equipped to have that. And it's really unfortunate because it's not taught in schools. I don't want to be the guy who's like, they should, but it's true. They're in addition to learning the periodic table of elements, we should also teach kids how to budget
Absolutely.
and how to balance a checkbook and how
to
credit
engage.
works and just, basic life skills. Unfortunately, that's not happening in a lot of places. It is a conversation that needs to happen around the family table.
It's the
I want to hear your answer
Yeah.
to the success piece, because you have so many stories that you could absolutely point to. I wanted to go back to something about, you bought your first home when it was time to kind of move on, and you guys decided to keep that as a rental property.
Yes.
That's also something that's not taught. When I was growing up, your parents owned a home, your friends' parents owned a home, and that's what you got to see, right? This is the home I grew up in, so this is the normal thing. And the conversation was more around, this isn't where you start. It took us 20 years or 30 years to get into this home. We started in that starter home. The thought isn't typically there. So what you're teaching your children is going to benefit them immensely going forward. It's always been, well, okay, maybe we'll start at this starter home, stay there for however many years, which in a lot of cases winds up being shorter rather than longer.
Right.
But it's now, let me sell it so I can get the equity out of that to put down on the next property. And that's okay. Having that income, being able to utilize that property as an investment property, be cash flow positive, and then modeling that every stepping stone isn't just a stepping stone that you push away afterwards. It's how do you use that to continue to grow? Yeah.
And I'd be very honest with you, is we probably should have sold that house based off of where we were,
right,
financially at the time. But we didn't.
Right.
And I'm really glad that we didn't. My wife, Meg, and I had a really hard conversation about that. And it was a leap of faith. It was definitely something that we were like, this is very uncomfortable. We actually borrowed against the equity in our first home to as a down payment for our current home. And, I was new to the mortgage industry. I was still kind of getting my feet under me. Yeah. I wasn't making crazy money. Meg was staying home with our first daughter, and we had just found out that we were pregnant with our second, which was a surprise. Because we actually, again, that house, I told the story in the podcast before, our first home not only afforded us a place to live for many years, but we leveraged it to do IVF to get our first child. We leveraged it to buy our second home. We leveraged it to put me through college to go get my master's degree. That house has provided us such immense opportunity. And if we didn't make the decision to buy it when we did, we bought it instead of getting married because we had so many dollars, right? And if we didn't decide to keep it and turn it into rental property, our financial outlook would look very, very different. And I'm really grateful for my wife, because it was kind of like, hey, my thought was like, let's just sell this house and just be done with it. I don't want to be a landlord and so much we could roll over the equity. And she said, no, Dan, no, this is the house. This is our backup. Number one, this is our backup plan. If we take this shot and everything fails, we can always go back to that house and the payments is really manageable. Like I could work like take a $50,000 a year job and still make that payment, right? So this is like the worst case scenario. We go back there. But there was a risk involved in that. And I think that digesting that risk and going, I believe, I think it was really Meg. Meg was like, I believe in you. I think that you're going to do this. I have no concerns. If you don't think you can, you're wrong. Let's go make it happen. And we did. And it was really, really cool in hindsight, kind of looking back now.
Being uncomfortable and
so uncomfortable.
Kind of forcing you to.
It was early 2019, just pre-pandemic. And, it was not the ideal time to be buying our new home. But life just kind of forced us down that path. And thank goodness for her having the foresight to say, no, not going to sell that house. Anyway, let's go back to the prior question because I went on a tangent there. What's the thing for you, Bianca, that it's kind of like, hey, because I do this, I feel successful.
Yeah. So when you first asked that question, I was like, sorry about that. The honest question is I'm incorrigible about success. I don't ever feel like I have success. But as you guys were talking, one of the things that I talk about a lot with my kids and with clients actually, is leverage. And I am very fortunate to have a very close relationship with my two girls, 24 and 19. I remember when my 24-year-old turned 13, we were on a trip to Seattle. We were on the airplane, and it was the moment that she turned 13. And I had a little light up candle that she kind of blew out and pretend thing. And it was just such a sweet moment. And she turns to look at me and she said, you know what's going to happen now, right? It's like, no, and it was one of those moments where when you're being challenged and you're supposed to know the answer, but you don't.
Yeah.
And she announced, and she's the tiniest thing, shy, introverted, doesn't really, cause ruckus. I am 13, and that means I'm going to be a lot of trouble because you know what they say about teenagers. And I had an opportunity to leverage my relationship with her and say, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's not what we're going to do. Now, fair. I almost did put her on a plane from Seattle to Santa Rosa. I'm like, go with God. I hope somebody picks you up. Because she was incorrigible. So leverage to me is success, and leverage means that with your children, with your relationships, with your finances, you invest, and you invest to the point where you actually doubt your sanity. You just described that with the home.
Yeah.
You described that with your children. We know this in business, to the point where in marriage and partnership, like sometimes you're like, but you just invest because you know you can leverage it. You know you can come back to it and you can experience that moment of relief, of understanding, of purpose. And so I look at my girls and I'm like, yeah, you were never going to grow up and I was never going to, be 18 and go with God. Like, just go, good luck at school. We're so close and we're so connected, and I get to see them push back against me, and I get to be there to support them. And I have that same experience with clients. And so I'm okay with not knowing what my definition of success is for my life overall. But I do think it's really important to make that investment into people and companies and things.
Yeah, we describe it as like the bank of trust, right? Like you're making deposits, constantly making deposits into the trust bank. And then sometimes you need to cash those in, right? And sometimes you need to be able to grab your partner, business partner, life partner, whatever it is. And like, I need to take some trust out of it. I need to cash it in some of this because we've got an issue that we need to solve. And, we've had countless scenarios where I might be going a little off the rails and my wife would just be like, stop.
Yeah.
Like, done.
Yeah.
Like, we're not talking about this anymore. The decision's made. That's the end of it. And I need you to trust me that I'm not putting my foot down to be difficult.
Yes. Yeah.
I see this from a different perspective and I need you to stop.
Yeah.
I think that's really important in business relationships and with who you work with or work for, to be able to go like, hey, we're done here.
Right.
Like
think about it, even like in what you guys do, right? I think about the relationships I have in business. the longer you are able to make that investment, there's going to be a time where your client, whether it's a consumer or a leader or a business owner, whoever they might be, they need you to help them make a decision. And I don't know about you guys, but when I make critical decisions in my life, I need a voice of reason. Not because I am lost or clueless or don't know what I'm going to do, but because I need to know that I'm not missing something here, right? We only see so much. So we always talk about, I have my back. I need you to see what I don't see. And so as an advisor, you have that incredible opportunity to make that trust investment into the relationship, because they eventually will need you to be able to say, oh, I can't tell you what to do, but I've known you for a long time, been talking about this. And from where I sit, what I can see, I think this is a good choice for you.
Yeah. I think that's really critical. I mean, I think we, I get countless scenarios where that comes into play, and just a lot of people get tunnel vision, right? Like, we've had situations and deals where like the realtor's job is to sell the house.
Yep.
Right.
Right. And I'm like, that is the bias that you have going into this. And I totally get that, because that's how you get paid. And I understand that's why, not why you do it, but that's one of the driving factors for you.
One of the measures for success.
One of the measures, right? So, but let me help you see this from a different perspective, right? Let me show you kind of your blind spot. And sometimes, like you said, it's not that you doubt your ability to make the decision. It's just kind of saying it out loud to someone else and have them go like, yeah, that sounds right. It's just enough kind of validation for you to go, okay, good. Because if you're like way out of line, because if you are maybe blind to something and you're saying something that just makes absolutely no sense, the other person might go, I don't quite understand that. Like, help me get a little bit. Let me connect the dots. I don't fully see it. Right.
And that's where I think what I've always enjoyed about being in this industry, as big as it is, it's a very small industry. The relationships you build in this industry to be able to go to that bank of trust and have those conversations and say, hey, help me understand this a little bit more, or how can I do this? Can you help make an intro to that person? But being able to have those conversations because of the trust and relationships that you build are what makes it all worth it, right? To be able to have that conversation as an advisor and say, hey, did you think about it from this perspective, or did you see it in a different way?
Yeah, we have this, this goes down to the level of like, working with an underwriter. Like, hey, this is kind of gray. And hey, let's take this leap of faith together. We've done enough of these deals together where, if something kind of goes sideways, we have that's when that in post-close that we need to clean up. Like, I'm not going to leave you hanging here. And there's a lot of trust that's built there. So I think just the idea, like, this is like a perfect Todd Duncan conversation, right? It's like the idea of trust and how important like of a currency that is. And being someone who's trustworthy and being someone who also trusts other people to do their job is so critically important in business, and especially in the mortgage business where you're having hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, being lent to someone. And there is a factor of trust there that has to be made. So, what else do you guys want to talk about?
Well, what strikes me is, we're in the Bay Area, and I think of home ownership here, and I think of life here. And when I tell people where I live, they're always like kind of impressed because they remember coming here, or they want to. This is like a bucket item list.
Yeah, it's like a vacation destination. It's kind of like saying, like, I live at Disneyland.
I live at Disneyland. Yeah. And so I wasn't aware of that until I started traveling and, seeing the world or talking to people outside of this community. And so I really love living here. And it's actually allowed me to be even more in love with where I'm at and the people that get to work here. And one of the things that I like about it is that the ability to access the vehicle of home ownership is it's diverse. There's a lot of challenges, and then there's also people like you and others in the community who really work on that financial readiness, that education, that ability to to serve people in the community who really don't necessarily see themselves with their own key in their hands. And I just think that that's inspiring because it points to growth, and it points to the industry is challenged, the market is challenged, the economy is challenged, the whole darn world is challenged in every way that we could see. It also really gives us the opportunity to say, okay, so let's be a little bit curious about your specific situation. Where are you at? What can we do here together? And maybe we can't do anything in 30 days, but we can do something in the next 3 years. And we know how quickly that'll go by.
Yep.
So
Right.
I think that's so, to me, that's so inspiring. And I love living here for all of the beauty and the rugged and the loveliness and the wine and the food and the people, but also the opportunity to say, hey, challenges are here. What can we do to fix it?
Yeah.
How can we support you?
Yeah, I think, the lending landscape, and you can speak to this, it's just been very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was the pendulum swinging from, we can't find people fast enough to help us process and
Yep.
manufacture these loans, to now we've got to let everyone go because there's no loans to be made. And we're weathering that storm, and I don't think we're done with it. We're going to continue to weather that storm. But I do think that there is a unique opportunity, like you're describing. Like maybe there's not something that I could do right now to be, back to the great loan
Right.
days. But there are steps that I can take now, so that when opportunity arises, that we're prepared, we're ready to take care of that. I think the industry, last week or the week before, rates kind of ticked down, and there's a big kind of rush, and everyone's trying, all these refis are going to happen. I think there's a lot of panic. I think at like the executive level, there was some panic. We're like, oh boy, how are we going to do this?
Yep.
Yeah.
How are we going to actually make this happen? So I do appreciate the point about, though, like there's a lot of, even in this tough market, even in Northern California, where it's not inexpensive to buy a house, right? There's no $200,000 houses here, right? That there are still opportunities to plan, to work together, to co-create, solutions with one another, and to help people achieve that dream, and help them become homeowners. So yeah. And I guess furthermore, just like helping them with their overall business.
Yeah.
I think that's more what I'm interested in, honestly, more than just like the mortgage industry. It's like it's a way to get involved in people's lives and then help them to make their life better.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we talk about the mortgage process up front, and we'll kind of walk them through the process, and we do their education thing, but we wind up becoming the place they go to when they need anything.
And that's the
that's
key.
way
That's
more
what being
exciting.
an advisor
Right.
or
It's
a
way
consultant
more
is,
fun.
right? And
That's your brand. I love
it
that.
is, and that's where the success in this industry comes from, right? Instead of being transactional, instead of just doing that one loan, moving on, forgetting who that borrower was, really becoming an advisor to them. No different than who a financial advisor is. We're licensed. You have to continuing ed classes. Be their advisor. Understand what their future looks like, what their plans are.
Yeah.
Go along for the ride.
Yeah, I think that's one of those terms, unfortunately, that's just been kind of abused in a way. It's like, everyone's an advisor. I'm an advisor. You're an advisor. We're all mortgage advisors. It's like, well, no, I mean, it's different.
It is.
Yeah.
Like the idea, I don't think anyone in the mortgage industry is like, I'm purely transactional. I could care less about who you are as a person. I'm just here to make your loan and then never talk to me again. No one says that. Maybe some people, but very few people say that. Everyone says, no, I'm your lender for life, and always work with me, and you'll never need to talk to anyone else. The reality is that's not what happens. And so, like, this is maybe a different podcast, but one, why is that? And two, what's holding people back, like especially specifically mortgage originators, actually doing it?
I think that's where the value of what you talk about and getting under people to understand about your personal brand, what's involved in creating that brand, what's involved in what are the steps that you have to take to be that advisor. I mean, you've built a brand for yourself. People know to reach out to you. Like you said, you're involved in everything. They call you for everything.
That's my goal, honestly.
Brand, right?
Like if I could, instead of looking at like, the experience.com review thing, which I think is a cool tool, I would love to be able to gauge the success of a relationship as like 6 months after the transaction closes. Have we talked like more than twice.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's I'm going to start implementing that test. Like, we should be
Absolutely.
still involved.
Yeah.
Who did you
in your
use to
life.
get your mortgage?
People
If
don't
they can
know.
say that name,
Honestly, people don't know.
no.
The thing though too is like anything for life, right? That's a long time. So, and we use that because we've been told in some seminar that that's who we want to be.
Right.
I want to be your person for life. And that sounds very romantic and actually kind of easy to do. So then now how do you measure for that? I remember a few years ago, we worked with a lender and they had implemented the biggest, loudest, greatest CRM to reach their consumer and to be in front of them from the moment they had a loan application all the way through close. And then we created journeys for happy birthday and happy anniversary and happy Hanukkah and everything in between. And so we did this and it cost tens of thousands of dollars to implement, which fantastic. At no point did anyone want to stop and say, hey, can you do me a kindness? Open your email. Okay, what's in your email? Who's emailed you today?
Right.
And you will open this email from Crate and Barrel that just wished you a happy birthday.
Right.
Or are you more likely to have a relationship with a person? And I think this is in the lending space, it's so tricky because you have big lenders and then you have the originator. So if you go to big lenders, we've all seen their commercial and we've all know who they are and we can transact it online and we get a loan in 15 days or whatever they promise and we'll never talk to a person ever once. But if you're talking to a person, it's not, people don't have relationships with companies.
Right.
People have relationships with the person they work with. So if you want to be anything, like maybe 10 years, maybe 6 months, do they know? I love that. Have I talked to them? And it's not just for mortgage people. Have I talked to a client that I've worked with a year ago and I haven't worked with them since then? If the answer is not, yes, I have,
right,
then maybe I'm not relationship focused. I'm transactional.
And I think there's a place for the automation. We have some automations and you get some, things that happen automatically.
Love
and
automation.
That's totally great.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't take away from the annual or twice a year or whatever personal phone call.
That's it.
And you just pick up the phone and say, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Like, I know what your rate is. I know that you don't need a refi for all those reasons we outlined
Right.
earlier. You don't need me.
Yeah.
You don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
If you got a sub-3 rate and you're in your dream home, you don't need me.
Right.
But I still
Dan,
want to be relevant in your life.
You even said it about your own story, right? And so we have to think about this. My car dealer should send me a reminder that I need to get my oil changed. That would be really great service, right? And that would be an automated sort of thing. Statistically speaking, you are due for one.
Based off of X number of days.
Yes. But what you're describing is what you and your wife did when you bought the home and then you had a life event, and that life event was IVF, right? So if you had a mortgage advisor who said, hey, just checking with you, how are you guys? What are you up to? What's the biggest struggle you're dealing with right now? Is it that, you have a child that has different needs and you need to find a private school and you don't know how to make it work? Okay, let's talk about your home. Let's actually see what we can do. Let's brainstorm some things here. And you become the person that doesn't ask them to close a deal. You become the person that supports them in their, wait for it, life events. So if you want to be somebody who is anything for life, you got to engage their life.
Right.
And just be there for their life event.
That's it.
That's it.
And just check in.
Just check in.
And honestly, the thing that's kind of maybe counterintuitive is, in my experience, when I go into a conversation knowing that the person needs nothing from me, but I'm still reaching out just to check in, opportunities come up.
Yep.
Absolutely.
They have a coworker, a friend, a neighbor, a whatever.
I was just talking.
I was just
about
talking and then it's like, great. Instead of you telling that person to call me, would you pass their information on to me so I can call them? And I hope salespeople in general, even if it's not a mortgage, if you're just in sales at all, call your customers.
Yep.
Just call them. Because you never know what's going on in their life
You
and what they
never know.
need and how you might be able to help them. Or even if you can help them, like maybe you can refer them to someone who has that
Be a
expertise.
conduit
I mean,
to their
come on. Like
yeah.
and And when you do those things on repeat, and that just becomes part of who you are and like the DNA of your company and how you exist, good stuff happens.
Absolutely.
We talk about this because we talk about sales, right? And so if your audience be thinking about what they do, it doesn't matter what your job is, you're actually always in sales. And so Todd Duncan would be so happy with me hearing me say that. But I like thinking about it as business development because I really like that word development. And I remember the idea of
Okay.
We can wrap.
Let's wrap
Dan's got
on business
Goals.
development. Yeah,
I have no idea what's going on. So let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
So the point is that everyone's in sales, and it's so funny as we're sitting here, Todd Duncan texted me.
Oh my
So
gosh.
what are the odds of
his
that?
ears
And
are
I just
burning.
need to say Todd Duncan's name because I'm the only one
Yes.
that has
So hey,
that.
Todd, we'll have to tag him on in this.
Yes,
and
let's tag him.
yeah, so,
Yes.
I really appreciate you being here. Apparently,
you.
things are needing my attention
Yes,
outside
they
of the pod. I wish I could just podcast all day full time, but
it's so fun.
here we go.
You're good at it. So
Well, thank you for being
Thank
here.
you.
We'll do it
Thank
again
you.
sometime, and appreciate you being on By the
Yeah.
Bay. And that was a quick wrap.
Yeah, that
All
was.
right, see you all.
Thanks. Bye.
Real life, no
Yes.
takes.
that's right.
Next.
Stay up to date with Bay Area real estate. Hit subscribe now if you haven't already. Did you enjoy this episode? We love reviews in the Apple Podcasts app. We'll read yours on the show. This is By the Bay.
Landing Ear Media.